involved.
Of all the choices you could make, that is literally the worst one.
Rex?
Stay back! Find him. Find him. Bart, find him!
Alright everyone, bit of a bittersweet moment, but this is my final review for the final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars, Season 7. And as many of you know, the show has meant so much to me. It was my childhood, basically, and I love the show. You may be thinking, well, you only given it like 7.8 out of 10 rating. Well, that's true. That's for the plot. The characters, I would give like 1,000,000 out of 10, because the characters in the show are so great. And I have watched the first 2 seasons of Rebels, and I've watched a few episodes of season 3, but not that much past that, just because. Whoops. We start off with season 7, episode 1. First of all, this is one of those episodes where you're getting right into things. You're like, okay. I like the way it introduces the characters. I like how this episode is mainly focused on the clones. It just shows the friendship between them, and most of the plot is actually between them. I mean, this episode is probably more action than plot, which could be a bit unfortunate. There is little emotion, but that's not a huge flaw in this episode. You might be wondering why. It's because it's all about the clones, but when I mean emotion, I mean like these emotions that they have actually go to like hard grounds, which wasn't exactly here. Also, at times there could be like little suspense because there's this new clone force and like killing these battle droids, like, and you're like, ooh, there's one gone. But these are one of those fun episodes. This episode's really fun to look at. The plot is great. I just find that we could have gotten, even though we do have these characters that have strong emotions, especially Rex, who has evolved so much in the show, I feel like we could have gotten these emotions hitting to hard ground, which is something I wish this arc would have explored a bit more. 8 out of 10. Next episode had probably a bit more emotion. It humanized a lot of the characters, and yes, it still did show a lot of the friendship between some of the characters, but in this episode I was starting to notice something, which is that this arc felt like it was kind of stretched out. So they have to go to the Cyber Center on the planet of Anaxis, and after that they have to go to this planet Skako Minor to retrieve Echo, who apparently has this information. That's a really fun plot, but at times it could feel a bit stretched out. Not too much. It's not a huge flaw, because this is a really fun plot. It explores the characters a lot. One thing that I would kind of hope in this episode is, well, I would actually prefer it if Echo was died. First of all, it would really mess up Rex and how he thought. So this episode could feel a bit inconsequential at times if you look at stuff like that. But that's not a huge flaw, just something that I would have changed. I'll give this episode the same rating of an 8 out of 10. Next episode is probably the weakest in this arc. It didn't exactly advance the plot, it didn't exactly have the most emotions. It could feel at times like filler. There wasn't exactly much character or emotion, and this is also one of the episodes where you can tell where things are starting to be stretched. Because at the end of the second episode, they retrieved Echo, but they're still in Skako Minor. So the problem when you do something like that is then you have this whole episode of them escaping. This is one of those Save the Village type episodes. It's fun, but behind it there's and I'll give this episode a 7.5 out of 10. Next episode was probably the best out of the arc. I still should have felt like it had more emotion or character. It had a bit of character, and some of that was used for comedy, though, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. But we got to see the character of Anakin and how he evolved. It had some great on-point humor, and it was fun. It was a fun episode. I just think that we should have gotten a bit more character in that sense of loss. Episode 8.1 out of 10. Next episode, well, it was a kind of like one of those fun reintroductions to Ahsoka. It didn't exactly advance the plot or take her characters to emotional grounds. And some of the new characters that they introduced, well, I wasn't the biggest fan of. Like at all, sadly. it didn't exactly advance the plot. Could just feel like filler. And the other problem I have with that is, sure, we do explore characters, but I find that it takes quite a bit too long for these characters to be introduced and their personality, which I find very unfortunate. It could feel like this is stretched out. They just lead up to the final kind of thing. And I'll give this episode a 6.9 out of 10, just because it's kind of one of those fun reintroductions to Ahsoka. And Ahsoka is if not my favorite, one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars, and is my favorite character in the Clone Wars. I love how she evolved, even though it's just so heartbreaking. And it gets even more heartbreaking later. Now, next episode, I know a lot of people think that the next episode to this episode, Dangerous Debt, is the worst. I personally think that this one is the worst. Because, first of all, it doesn't exactly take your characters to emotional grounds at all. And even when it tries to do, some of the dialogue and some of the characters' emotions just make you go, ah. Like, there's a sequence where they're like trying to deliver spice. The problem when you have an episode with that is, first of all, it doesn't exactly explore anything new. This whole episode doesn't exactly explore anything new. Sadly, it didn't really explore the universe, which is very unfortunate. And another thing that I noticed in this episode was, well, it wasn't exactly the most fun plot, sadly, because you could just tell that it wasn't necessary. It didn't exactly build the most character traits, except for one trait.
No one is
Because
taking
that
my
doesn't
shit.
pay. And Trace and I have a lot of people on Coruscant waiting for money we owe them.
No one is taking my shit.
Think of all the good you could do.
I
said no one is taking my shit.
Yeah, so I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I also could feel like this was making everything stretch out. But one thing that is present throughout this arc is, I think, we learn about these characters. Even though we said that it takes quite a while for us to learn about these characters and all their traits, I think we do. I find that this episode and the episode in this arc has some really deep messages. But, well, as a whole, I'll give this episode a 6.4 out of 10. Next episode, I felt the same way. Next episode actually started off pretty well, in my opinion. We had some emotions, and we learned about how the Martin sisters kind of don't exactly like the Jedi. The problem that I have with this is we kind of already know that. Ahsoka left the Order because she felt betrayed by the Order. Even in like the intro of last episode, it was like, in the short time together, Ahsoka has learned that not everyone sees a Jedi's hero. Something that she only learned herself recently. I was like, exactly, something she only learned herself recently. So why exactly do we have this arc? So I wasn't the biggest fan of that. Also, this episode, they start in like jail and they end in jail. What? And it wasn't exactly the biggest fan of that. Well, the thing that I don't hate this episode is because, sure, it did explore these characters a bit more. I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of some of these characters, but I do like Ahsoka. And this was just everything we've kind of seen before, which was also very unfortunate in my opinion. Like, we've been to Opadia before. We've seen the Pikes, but we haven't seen the Marcha sisters. But how the Marcha sister thinks is the exact same. So I wasn't the biggest fan of that. But it was a bit more dark than the previous episode. And I'll give this episode a 6.5 out of 10. Next episode, I could also feel a bit of the same way. Sure, it finished this arc decently. I found the pacing was kind of I feel like some of the decisions here didn't exactly have the most lead up, knowing that, well, in their short time together these Marcha sisters had with Ahsoka, I don't feel like there's enough for this big decision for them to help Ahsoka escape. I don't think there's enough of that, which is very unfortunate in my opinion. And, well, we also had some of the Marcha sisters, and this episode sadly didn't exactly have the most emotion, which is very unfortunate. It didn't exactly take any of her characters to emotional grounds. It also something that we've seen before. It feels like this arc is stretched out. It has a huge twist that I feel like should have been explained a bit more prior to this arc. Okay, why don't you re-explain that, huh? But it was probably the best of them, because, you could tell that it wasn't filler because the next episode wasn't filler. So it's setting up the next episode pretty decently. I'll give this episode a 6.9 out of 10. Next episode, wow, okay, so this season had an okay start, a bit of a bumpy start, I would say, but this last arc is some of the best Star Wars content ever. These last 4 episodes, okay, we're starting with Old Friends Not Forgotten. It has a lot of emotion, it has a lot of character, and it's fun, and it takes everything that we know about our characters and adds on to them, and it explains how the line between Revenge of the Sith and this episode very well, and that's what I absolutely love. And this episode is just so heartbreaking. Like, when Ahsoka and Anakin reunite, Ahsoka is just so dismissive and cold to him, which is very heartbreaking. I've been watching quite a bit of videos. There's this one in particular called Anakin and Ahsoka's Unbreakable Bond. It's partially because their friendship is the best friendship that I've experienced. Yes, even better than Sam and Frodo. Yes. It's just so heartbreaking. You feel for these characters. And I'll give this episode a 9.9 out of 10. Next episode really set the stage for what was going to happen next really well. It had emotion. It really removed the line between bad and good very well. It had some really entertaining sequences, and it had a huge sense of dread. This episode actually used the predictability as the advantage, because we built up all these new characters from the show, and now we get to see them change. The problem with some of the episodes is they use it to their advantage as well, but it didn't exactly advance the forward plot or have any new characters. If you understand what I mean. This episode did that very well. It was really dark, and I love this episode. It was just so heartbreaking, and I'll give this episode a 9.9 out of 10. Each episode thus far in this arc progresses over one another, and then we get to Shattered. That name of the episode is how I felt. This episode was heartbreaking. It had so much character. I was crying. I was on the edge of my seat when I watched this. It was so heartbreaking and emotional. And it really evolved all these characters really well. As well as how it manages what's happening in Revenge of the Sith, as well as the Clone Wars. For example, there's like this Jedi hologram meeting, and right when Anakin leaves and the camera pans away, Ahsoka comes in, and that's really genius. And also the music is really eerie, and that's what I love. The music in the last few episodes really shine. I'll give this episode a 9.9 out of 10. The last episode. This episode was so heartbreaking. It was so action-packed, and it was really cool to look at, actually. It was emotional. The music here really shined. And I rarely do this, but I think I'll give The Clone Wars Season 7, Episode 12 a 10 out of 10. I love this episode. I love the last 4 episodes of the season. Had a bit of a bumpy start. I've been debating about the grade for this season, but I'll give Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7 an 8.2 out of 10. If it was just the last 4 episodes, this would get a 9.9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. But since I'm reviewing the whole season, well, probably I can't give it. So now let's talk about what I'm gonna do next. I might finish Rebels. I'll probably do a Rebels Season 1 and 2 review. Yeah, I think I'll... we'll see. I might finish Rebels, but maybe not. After this, I'm gonna go to The Lord of the Rings. Another series that means a lot to me, that I've been a fan of ever since I was really young. I'll probably do the MCU after. Then I'll probably do Harry Potter. After that, I'm probably gonna do Indiana Jones, Pirates of the Caribbean, James Bond. Remember, it's just my opinion. My opinion's in the right opinion, just my opinion.